Good morning, my friends. This is another installment to the Fat Man GM's Breakfast Time Rant and Rave review. Um, recently, recently, I've had some conversations with a few people on the internet, YouTube stuff, about cities and city creation. It can be challenging and interesting and fun for a GM. Uh, where I learned to do my stuff is, of course, the pre-made things from the companies over the decades. We all learn how to do improvise, improvising things as we go. We also plagiarize. We steal. We borrow. Hey, it looks good, sounds good, playable. Why not take a use of it and run? And I think most of our contemporaries would see that as the way it works, part of what we want to do, and it's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Now, in particular, I want to reach back, way back, and talk to you about a company that was called Judges Guild. Now, this is one of the early predated Wizards of the Coast stuff. This is back when TSR ruled the roost, and Ed Greenwin and his cohorts were cranking out stuff. But they weren't the only ones, especially when Gygax came out with the original basic sets. There was Greyhawk, there was a couple oddballs, but I think Tunnel and Trolls even originated back in that particular era. Don't quote me on that. Was never a huge fan of that particular system, but it's playable. And I think I mentioned this before. My local game store at the time had a shelf of stuff that was either discontinued or just the Ivor, the owner, had purchased, and once it didn't sell or got down to small enough numbers, he just shoved them into boxes and threw them under the bottom shelf. I love to dig through the bottom shelf because A, I was a broke teenager and every dollar mattered, and B, there was a lot of interesting stuff there. And among those things was this stuff from a company called Judges Guild. And this is a couple guys got together and decided to make some supplemental material for the early Dungeons and Dragons. And they, over the decade, early 70s, the mid 70s to early 80s, they made quite a bit of stuff. And I've got more here. I don't have all of it. There's a lot of stuff that either got misplaced, borrowed, never returned to me, or I just couldn't get around to purchasing because I either didn't have it, and at the time I wasn't aware that you could actually try to contact these people. Now, I've done a little research on the net. You can buy this stuff in off the internet. Some of it's the original stuff. Some of it's replication copies. I also get downloads from the online internet sources for a price. I believe the Judges Guild's legacy, the people, the second or third generation of the owner or the creators, maybe even the originals, are still floating around out there, but they're not really making a whole lot of new stuff. They are reproducing or selling some of the older version stuff. Now I haven't actually gone and looked up to see if they do get up to date stuff, but hey, that's up to you to go do. Now, what I wanted to mention about this stuff is, aside from the awesome maps, and sadly I don't have one handy at the moment to show it to you. They're in storage. I did do some PDF scans of them here a while back. If you took all of them, each one of these little supplements, if you will, these little guidebooks, came with 4 maps, and these maps were 2 foot by 2 foot. So if you put these things together, I think I had 16 of them total, and you could wallpaper a wall with them. And I did at one time hang them up on one wall at my parents' house, and it was impressive as all get out. And I like that system. I like the Hex Map system that originated from the early days. I still like that today. I don't like the square system because I don't think it gives you proper facings. There's a lot of arguments can be made that, oh, sure, that the square is more uniform over the hex, but in truth, I don't think it represents true movement. It's too much like a chessboard in that aspect. You cannot pivot and stand at an angle to your foe, not in a square box. Where in a hex map, well, that's exactly what it's for. And you have 8 sides, and that's the sides you're going to face. And it covers the the main compass points and the secondaries. Anywhere, I'm not here to go on about hex maps or maps in general. Judge the guild itself. What go back and keep in mind if you get your hands on any of this stuff. Here's the Wildlands of High Fantasy. This one came with maps 1 through 5, according to my little scrib notes up here on top. It's 10 17 by 22 inch campaign maps. Okay, and basically all this was is a list of what you'll find on the maps, locations, ideas for games, basic stuff like this. And it was all set up to be run off of the original D&D rules, and it easily translates over into AD&D and later versions. That in and of itself is part of the charm of the simplicity of the system. Here's a view of one of those Hex maps. Not the area maps, mind you, but the six-sided, sorry, not 8, six-sided hexes that we use, back of the box right there. I think of the original, I wouldn't say that these guys originated the mass chart full of things, because I really think Rollmaster probably did a bigger job of doing that than anybody else. That's just my opinion. Hey, here's another diagram of all the big 6 maps. At some point I will do a follow-up on this, and I'll show you at least one of them. I learned my mapping skills from trying to mimic these guys. A lot of good stuff on the terrains and various encounters that you're going to find. A few fuel rule modifications or suggestions, and that's something that Judges Guild was good about doing. They didn't load it up with additional new stuff when it comes to that sort of thing. The reason behind that was that they know they didn't have to, because TSR was doing it for them. They were creating the game system that we would all play, and this was just a world you could choose to play in. Where's this one from? 1977. Good Lord, that was the same year Star Wars came out. I was, 11 years old? Ooh, yeah, that's how old I am. You young puppies. You know what age is. And there was a few of you guys that got me Trump, so hey, nothing wrong with that. Where is that one I just saw? Because I really liked it. I wanted to. Isn't that the way it goes? You think something, you're going to go do something, and then it doesn't quite work out. The Wilder Lands, the Fantastic Reaches, another section of the particular book. Under the copyright, this is something I thought interesting. It may not be interesting to you, but it did me. And everybody's heard of the TSR. TSR, that Gygax either bought into, sold into, or was bought out by, who became the biggest motivator of Dungeons & Dragons and most of this genre, as far as I'm concerned. There could be a lot of arguments saying that just TSR wasn't the only thing, but they were the motivator. I think the generator, the engine that pushed this along to where it is today wouldn't exist for these people otherwise. For the longest time, I didn't really know what TSR stood for. Oh, I'm sure I'd read it at one time when I was younger, but so much stuff you don't retain, things you don't consider important. TSR always confused. I had to argue with people that it wasn't part of Radio Shack, because back then, I know this goes back to the archaic days. We had computers. They were called. The one my uncle had one was a TSR 80 Radio Shack. You had to hand code everything, and it sucked. And kind of got me set back because I got turned off on computers, and I missed out on the early better stuff that came along. Anyway, copyright 1980 by Judges Guild Incorporated. It gives an address. All rights. This book is a venture designed, officially approved to use with Dungeons and Dragons, run by Tactical Studies Rules. Isn't that a bit of an awkward name? TSR sounded much better. Probably why I didn't bother to retain Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Context of fun may need to be changed by the individual judge to suit the campaign he or she moderates. No similarity between any of the names, characters, persons, and/or institutions in this publication with those living and dead. Blah blah blah. That is the contents of this book may need to be changed by the individual to suit the campaign he or she moderates. The individual judge. You know, it's PC, I guess. It's standard today. We all call ourselves game masters or GMs. Prior to that was dungeon masters. There's still a few holdouts that hang on to the DM, the GM, or the dungeon master title. Although, truth is, I always liked the concept of the judge. We are the game judge. We're the moderator of the game. We are helping everybody else move through it. The world that we've either chose to play in, something that was pre-made, by somebody else, or one we made ourselves. Now, as a young man, I latched onto these things because I got them fairly cheap. I don't remember just how cheap. I know that this from 1970, 1980 was $8.50. It came with 4 in those fantastic maps, and then of course the city versions, which several of these contain multiple books, lots of detail in them, and I latched onto these things. Well, shoot, this was $8 too, right? I guess they had a theme, but it was a good system and I enjoyed it and I gained so much knowledge from it. I didn't get an opportunity to play in Judges Guild's world that much. I don't remember ever running a campaign per se in it, and that's because my friends and I, we were big on making our own. We did this the same with Greyhawk, and originally when Forgotten Realms came out, we really didn't play in those realms. We incorporated the stuff we found in their books into our own, and that's the way a lot of people run things today. So anyway, I'm just telling you, if you don't have Judges Guild, if you're at least interested in it, go look it up, Google it, and see what's out there. If you can get your hands on a couple of the old copies, awesome. They make a good addition to any GM's shelf and toolbox. I recommend them highly and wish the company had continued and produced more modern stuff, although I'm sure that would have killed the flavor of them. The beauty of the particular of Judges Guild in their products was their simplicity. Thank you for listening to me this morning, and you have yourself a great holiday.